Good afternoon, and welcome to Two on One, the everybody's favorite weekly talk show, featuring two ministers talking theology and pop culture with usually another minister. I am your co-host, the Reverend Arthur Stewart, joined by the Reverend Stephanie Kendall, as per the usual. And hey, Spiff,
Hi.
a couple days early. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Arthur. You know what? I actually got you something.
What? I got you something. Okay.
I bought you a cozy for your salad spinner.
Oh no, Spiff, I sold my salad spinner so I could buy you these ornamental ice cube trays.
Are you kidding me? Arthur, I sold my freezer so I could buy you that salad spinner cozy.
Oh, we gift of the Magi to each other. I guess we should have gotten each other something from Jeff One Designs.
I mean, Jeff One Designs is celebrating 15 years of making ordinary time extraordinary time.
I could have gotten you a parament, or a stole, or a cope, or a chasuble, or a processional banner, or a sanctuary banner.
And really any kind of liturgical textile, Arthur, and any at all. And we know so many folks who love Jeff's work, craftsmanship, and quality. These products of Jeff One Designs are incredible.
Absolutely. It's a veritable ecumenical movement of people who love his work. I guess I'll go return the ice cube trays and see if I can get my salad spinner back.
And I'll go swap the koozie back for my freezer.
I guess next time we should get each other something from Jeff One Designs.
Arthur, and if we do that this year, we can use the 2-on-1 special promo code.
Wait, we still have that? It's still going on?
We do. Through the end of the year, our listeners can use the promo code 2-on-1, all one word, at checkout, 15% off their stole order, their whole stole order.
That's 2-on-1, no spaces.
2-on-1, all one word, yes.
All right, well, we should totally go to jeffwonrow.com after our show today and find nice gifts for each other. Jeff Wonrow, JEFFWUNROW.com. These stills still steal the show.
I appreciate that tagline for him.
Yeah, I know.
We say it every week, and I feel like it'll be worked into his website's traffic. Speaking of website, Arthur.
Yeah.
Guess what 2-on-1 Project has?
Is it a website?
It is. We have our very own website now, 2on1project.com. Hope you can all go to it. And that is a place where you can see all of our videos, all of our podcasts. It's all right there for you. You can learn a little bit about you and I and find out who is coming up next on each week. So go to 2-on-1 Project.
So speaking of who is coming up next, Colin Craney had to reschedule, and we totally understand, and we will hopefully have Colin back in January. So today, our pinch hitter to talk about a Muppet Christmas Carol. So I'm happy to welcome back the Reverend Whitney Waller Cole, as I know you are too.
Maybe I'm a big fan.
I'm a big fan also, and we're not talking about anything wet, hot, American, or summer. We're actually talking about snowy, cold, British winter and a Muppet Christmas Carol. So hello, Whitney. Welcome back.
Hi. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, y'all.
Thank you for coming.
Yes. Thank you for stepping in so quickly. I know that this is not an easy time. So is it the most free week you have, Whit?
I don't really have a lot going on. So I was glad to see some opportunity to talk about Christmas this week, because otherwise I wasn't going to get to. So thanks, y'all.
We're happy to help out.
So
yes,
at the last minute, because, and we completely understand, and we're not giving Colin a lick of trouble, we had to reschedule, and I was like, oh, Whitney, what do you want to do? And one of the things on your list was Love Actually, which I've never seen, and I have a 10-year-old at home, so I'm not really ready to deal with that bridge. But you also said a Muppet. I want you to come back for Love Actually, because I feel like we would ruin it in a good way.
I need to clarify that on my list, two of the options we're discussing, the worst Christmas movie of all time, which would be Love Actually, or the best Christmas movie of all time, which would be A Muppet Christmas Carol. I just need the folks at home to know that I am not Team Love Actually, though I am still Team Liam Neeson, and you can be both.
Why is the Muppet Christmas Carol the best Christmas movie ever? And Spiff, I want to talk about your experience with the Muppets after this.
Sure.
So I believe that A Muppet Christmas Carol is the best Christmas movie ever because, one, there is something for everyone in the movie.
Okay.
Two, it tells a story that is old, but tells it differently. Three, musical for Muppets. It's amazing. It's the best.
Well, and you grew up with the Muppets, right? What?
I did. I love the Muppets.
And Spiff, is this one of those like big gaps in your pop culture knowledge?
Sure is. Thanks for bringing that up.
Well, no, you have weird gaps.
I do. I have very weird gaps. I will share. Like I grew up a Sesame Street person, so like the characters of like puppets.
Yeah.
I understand. I understand singing like in theory, I get it all. I watched the cartoon Muppet Babies when I was a kid because it came on at like some time that, you just watched it. So like I was aware of the younger selves of some of these characters, and have seen them in action. I'm not like, and I lived in LA. You used to drive by Jim Henson's studio, which has a big Kermit the Frog and a top hat, and so I know them. I've just never been engaged with the material kind of writ large, including A Muppet Christmas Carol, to which I have now watched twice just for this interview in the last, I guess, probably like 8 hours. Or no, 12 at this point. But so I've watched it. I'm familiar to a degree with it now, but this is a big hole because I don't know that Teen Love actually is like the best Christmas movie, but when it was posed, which one do we do? It was like, I'd never seen Muppets. Arthur had never seen Love Actually, so we'll just go with best Christmas movie of all time, apparently.
I was the one texting each of you before I was texting both of you, so I swung it in my favor because we just watched it.
Happens that way.
It's fine.
Okay, for those of you that don't know A Christmas Carol, I don't know. Well, some people don't know the Muppets. A Christmas Carol was written in the...
We have Jewish listeners.
I'm sorry that you failed 8th grade.
Yeah. A Christmas Carol was written by Charles Dickens, that great sentimentalist. It's the story of Ebenezer Scrooge. One of my favorite lines in all of literature is Scrooge loved the darkness. It was cheap. So it's this story of a man who is just bitter and angry and sad and I was going to use a different word for cheap. And he is haunted by 3 ghosts that show him the past, the present, and the future yet to come, to get his head on straight, essentially. And he does. And he turns all around. And today is our solstice show with Whitney. She is like the sun at this time of year. She's going to be here for a short amount of time. But we're gonna get to our questions because it is important. So the first one, I would like to ask, if that's okay, dear Spiffimus.
I'm trusting you all for these questions and I will chime in. So.
Okay. So in the original story of the Christmas Carol or A Christmas Carol, Marley is one person. And Marley is a ghost who sets the whole thing off and visits and he's like, you're going to be haunted. And in the rendition of the Muppets, it's Waldorf and Statler as the Marley brothers. Is this the best thing to have ever been done in an adaptation ever? Why or why are you wrong?
It is the best thing to have ever been done in an adaptation. 1, double the Marley.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. 2, Waldorf and Statler are my favorite Muppets. They are the names of my dogs.
I was like,
important to remember.
Dogs' names?
Those are my dogs' names. So as you can see, the Muppet stan within me is long haul. But I actually think that it's very clever and very smart because one of the things in the play or in the book, and we'll talk about, different adaptations that we have seen of it, is that one of the main MO that the character of Marley has in there is that Marley is supposed to be this foreboding creature, person of warning creature in this adaptation because Muppets, but is the person warning Scrooge not to live life the way that Marley lived life. And so to hear it coming from those 2 people who are able to still impress upon you that they enjoyed being awful, but still hate where being awful got them, I think actually adds a much more interesting dynamic onto the change that you see Scrooge undergo as he discovers that's not a way that he wants to live, and not just because of punishment that awaits him. And I think it's something that you get offered by having two characters who can play off of each other there better than you would in the original story.
Yeah, Scrooge is miserable. He's not miserable to make other people miserable. He's just
right.
Yeah.
Well, and there's I was really, so I will name it. This is when I was watching it the very first time, I laughed out loud when they came up, and because it's also set against a song, and the song in and of itself is, I mean, I think it plays a beautiful juxtaposition of what it means to be awful, to tell these awful things in a song that is kind of upbeat. It's very kind of like, and then they do there's like a ghost thing happening where they're like, oh.
I could maybe bust out a good portion of the song for you. But I also appreciate go ahead, Arthur.
Oh no, could we all do the ghost noise in tandem just one more time? Ooh. Thank you. I want that for our listeners.
I also just appreciate and I think that it's a clever use, and I'm sure we'll talk about who do you decide as a person versus a Muppet and all of that stuff. But I think it's such a clever use of the Muppets, because the reality is that the level of arch that they are is so beyond life in who they're presenting and playing, that I think that it's really helpful to have those terrible things that they're saying put in the mouths of Muppets. You know, they talk about, remember that Christmas that we evicted everybody from the orphanage and we got to watch all of the children freeze in the snowbank? These are the things that they're reliving, though I would argue that there are perhaps some human beings in our world currently who probably equally gleefully would look upon that. But I don't need to name any of them.
You can look it up.
That's you.
Just Google children in cages.
Who's my congressperson?
Who's your congress?
Yeah. Hey, no, I don't need to go political deep dive. I just have letters that I have to write. And it's
Christmas cards. They're Christmas cards, if you will.
It's Cole, but it's just a matter of you only won by this many votes. I can register that many voters. I'm not scared. I
like voter registration confidence going into the new year. Here's Georgia.
This is my I got my paycheck from George Soros. I'm ready to anyways. But that's something else. Okay, so with the things coming out of the mouth, Scrooge's nephew is not a Muppet, and he says some devastating stuff in it. I just want to bring him into this conversation of it.
Yes.
Would it have been? It landed that woke. That's the turning point with Scrooge. It's not Tiny Tim; it's his nephew hating him.
Right.
Or at least that's what opens the door. Would it have been different if Rolf played the nephew?
I just like Rolf a lot. So I do think it would have been different. I do think it would be different.
Rolf is the piano playing dog, Spiff.
Is what?
The piano playing dog.
Oh, okay. I had to look him up. I've seen it. I know
a main fixture of Muppet Babies.
Yes.
Yes. I was like, I think
actually the Muppet Baby I remember the most.
Okay, so I gotta just point this out. Of all of the characters they left out, I was expecting to leave Rolf out of the Muppet Babies because he's the depressed piano playing dog who's clearly an alcoholic. But whatever. Okay, never mind.
Well, they left Animal too, and that guy's on ketamine, so.
Yeah, true. I would have loved to see Dr. Teeth when he was just Mr. Teeth. Okay, so the nephew, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's one of the pieces of what makes this such a wise adaptation for me, is that they allow a lot of the lines that he says that are so devastating. Those are direct lifts from the original story itself. And I also, and maybe this is something for us to get into in a second, but they do a really good job of dialing back and bringing in the most important parts of Dickens' story and the most important lines, because for those of you who maybe have forgotten this little tidbit, this was a story that was written by Dickens to get paid by the word. That was a common just a common way of making the money. It's maybe even part of why he has this miser storyline in the story. But that does mean that maybe Charles Dickens threw some chapters in there that we didn't really need. And because Muppets, heavy, and also children's movie, hour and a half long, we got rid of all of that excess baggage, and I'm grateful.
Yeah, I appreciated how, like, I looked at it and it was just like the length of it. It's like an hour and 26 minutes. And I was like, oh, this is very doable. This is like, this is a very, like, lots of stories tend to drag on. We have lots of reversions of, especially around Christmas time. There's so many different things. But I want to go back, I think, if we can for a second, pointing back to who casting. I guess it's just an overall cast. Who and what is a Muppet and whatnot. Because I was like, oh, I appreciated that, like, Scrooge wasn't, or Ebenezer Scrooge isn't a Muppet, that it's Michael Caine, he's human. And
not just human, but Michael Caine.
And not just human, but Michael. And I read some articles about all of this in preparation, in which he said that, like, he was committed to playing this as if he were at the Royal Shakespeare Company, that, like, it was very much, he was playing this very dark character, this very, deeply troubled character, let's say instead, and with an authenticity that, like, carried that against these Muppets, and that, again, the only other Muppets that I thought, it was an interesting juxtaposition of who they allowed to say some of the, like, darker things, which are like Waldorf and Statler, right? You come and hear the thing, but that the storyline that is about transition, is about change, is about love, is about what it means to live into a spirit of Christmas, is all Muppet based, and all the kind of, like, horribleness of humanity is from the mouths of the humans. Mm-hmm. And I think that's for me, that showed really well in a way that I was like, ooh, I really hope I have a 3.5-year-old niece. I'm like, I hope she sees this. So there's an embedded understanding of that, like, the trauma and the hurt and the ills of this world are of humans and can be fixed and transformed also through relationship and through our humanness.
Yeah.
Did I miss that part? I mean, like, am I putting my own understanding of?
No, that's part of what makes this the best Christmas movie to me, Spiff, going back to what I said about how there's something in it for everyone. Mm-hmm. I think that it is such a wise and important reality for us to recognize that in every season of our lives, but I think especially around Christmas, to take advantage of an opportunity to let children know that in a world that can feel really dour, in a world that can feel really difficult, this light that we talk about shining, this love of Christ, this joy of Christmas, that does enter in. But in order for that to have real merit, real value for how we talk with children about that, they have to be able to see the parts of things that are more the shadow side of life, those more difficult pieces of that. And we shy away from telling those stories to kids because it's uncomfortable, because it's scary. And it turns out the answer really is just, we need Muppets. I think that it's done so effectively and so well. It's just really beautiful. What were you going to say, Arthur?
Are you familiar with John Bell out at the Iona community? Yeah. John Bell told the story years ago about whenever they have tours from school children, inevitably one of the teachers will be like, oh, well, you tell a Bible story to the kids. And John Bell always tells the story of Yael nailing the Sisera's head to the ground. Because it scandalizes the teacher, and because he's like, kids love this stuff. And the Muppets always treat their audience like they're smart enough to handle it.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost that. On the human Muppet thing, I do want to talk about the ghosts real fast, because first of all, the Ghost of Christmas Past makes me want to never time travel. But secondly,
very scary.
Is that the little girl?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was terrifying.
Like a doctor. I was
like I watched it at like 11 o'clock last night, and I was like, "Who? What? Like this?"
Yeah. Not only is it, well, it almost feels like somebody was like, "Hey, we've got this new technology thing that could make like a ghost. Like, do you want to try it?" And then they did it for that, and they were like, "I don't know that I liked it, but also we don't have time to reshoot it, so we're keeping that creepy girl."
Super creepy.
That was part of it, but also the person who wanted to do it and was like, "I'll totally take care of it," forgot until about 20 minutes beforehand and just started gluing felt to light bulbs. So
we've all been there. We've all been there.
We've done youth and children's ministry. We've all
That's
done that.
right. Give me duct tape and a bag of Oreos. Go.
King Herod. Yeah, it worked. So the Ghost of Christmas Present, though, is human, but he's a Muppet, or he's Muppet, but he's a human. I don't know which is which. And as we talked about, so I kind of like that. And playing off we need the Christmas in that. I think that intersection. He's the most. He's the most interwoven of the two.
I agree.
All of the human-ish Muppets, except for Beaker and Benson, were given minimal parts.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that is interesting to think about.
I do want to talk about the transformation of Scrooge. I don't know if you guys saw this, but it was an article that's floated around, I think from The Atlantic in the last couple of weeks, has been the thought process of Miss Piggy during the last 5 minutes of A Christmas Carol.
I haven't seen that yet.
Okay. You know what? I'm going to pull it up on my... because I think it's important.
That sounds like such fake typing right now.
I was like, what is this?
I know how fast you do actually type, so that was real typing, but it was very hysterical on this end of like, let me pull it up.
So it's actually from Substack. Let me see here. My husband's boss, the man who has harassed the gentleman I love every day for years and has belittled our family to the extent that we lived in indentured servitude while I attempt to care for our disabled son, has just offered to pay our mortgage. Nothing comes for free, Scrooge. You and I have been around enough times to know that. Bob might be able to accept your gift with open-hearted sincerity, but you and I know different. You and I have lived on the mean streets of Victorian Muppet London, where the people are cruel, the Muppets crueler, and there are no cheese for us Mises. I'm going to send you the link is what I'm going to do.
Please do.
We'll post it on Facebook for all to see for listening.
Your employer has brought an uncooked 14-pound turkey to my house on Christmas Day, and I am asking you, Bob, with my eyes, because incomprehensibly the entire city, including some people we've never met, are now in our home and are expecting to be fed. And it's everything I wanted.
I'm really looking forward to that.
But let's talk about the end. Let's take it outside of the Dickensian Victorian. Everything is fine now. What does it mean if a bad guy is transformed? What if it's somebody who does evil no longer is participating in evil? What does the process of reconciliation look like? How does a Muppet Christmas Carol exemplify the good parts, and where does it leave it lacking? And
you can go first. Yeah, go for it.
I would say there has to be, and the word has fallen out of my head.
Reparations?
Reparation. There has to be reparation. There has to be a material shift, and the turkey and the mortgage both change the situation beyond just words.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and I was going to say, Substack article aside, which sounds hysterical, I do actually think that something that is done very well, and again, I think this is faithfully using the original text, but actually taking a really skilled edit to it. They stack in the beginning for you an understanding of all the things that would have to change in order for Scrooge to actually be living a life that allows him to be in community with people. And, those are all of the things that Bob Cratchit suggests in that scene of talking about, well, it's customary to give all of Christmas Day off. And what you hear in the mouth of the nephew and all of these things. And all of those are ideas that Scrooge reveals he actually heard when people said them. And I think that that's important because that becomes a confessing act, not just an act of like a realization, but him saying, these are things that I've denied to people that I had the power and ability to give. And what he goes and does is that he gives them and completely changes. I mean, he changes a business model based upon, this realization and revelation. And I think that that's really important to recognize because it's not just that Scrooge was, tight with his own money. It's that Scrooge made his money and his living off of squeezing every penny that he could out of the people that he was the landlord for. And I feel like it does a good job in our reparations piece, obviously like tying it much neater and, much faster, but I think it's interesting. I think it does it well.
Well, yes. And I'm sorry, I'm going to throw one more thing out there about Miss Piggy in the last 5 minutes of the movie. when he's like, "Why aren't you at work today, Bob Cratchit?" And you can tell she's about to judo chop him in the stomach, probably a little bit, but yeah. I wish they would have put Miss Piggy karate. I feel like you're missing out, Spiff.
Well, I do know that she karates. I do know that she like randomly speaks French. Like I'm not, again, Miss Piggy is in the lexicon of society. Like I understand like what's happening, but like it was just more of the context of the movie. But I will say my favorite transformation in the movie, or I don't know if it's a full transformation, but like one of my favorite moments in the movie is I want to say it's during the Christmas present and it's the dinner scene and they're all praying essentially or giving thanks. They're doing the cheers and like there's a real through gritted teeth that Miss Piggy makes the like, okay, to Scrooge for making this meal possible or whatever. I'm missing the language and I know that y'all know it. So, but I think that it glosses over what it like that moment of her real reluctancy to give thanks to the evil that has brought her to this place. And, there was a part of this show back in our early episodes in which we used to ask kind of consistently is this person redeemable, and whatever. And for me, it brought it back kind of to that moment because she talks, we all know people in our lives and in our world that are doing just like severe harm. And yet the gospel calls us to love our neighbor. And, and I think that there's a real wrestling that happens there that is so holy and so unique to that moment that I'm like, oh, this is the gospel. This is it right here. We are watching in real time someone struggle with sin and salvation in one statement, which is like giving thanks to someone who did make what we have possible, but should have made so much more possible. And that's during this time of year, especially when people love to throw money at charities and, and it's a lot of like, let's do this good, but what does it mean to really give thanks for the sustainability of connection and the calls of community that are written into our gospels and are written into our church texts and who we are as people. And I think that for me, that moment, I love the overall Scrooge kind of, coming, but we've also made Scrooge a synonym for those people, right? The Scrooges of the world, like that's really come in. And I think that that Miss Piggy moment is so many of us right now in the church that I just want to name that I was really moved there that if for me, that's the part I was like, oh, this is a gem. This is it.
So what if, okay, no, I'm sorry. Whitney, you looked like you were going to say something and I was off on my
No,
own.
You're good. Well, I was just going to say, I think that that's a really good moment to lift up, Spiff, and especially thinking about in our current context and being around the holiday season of not even necessarily thinking about the folks that we would label as Scrooges, but thinking about that the ways that we're sometimes we should be called into a better understanding of what we think of as charity or largesse, like the juxtaposition of Bob and of Mr. and Mrs. Cratchit, both being, obviously on the same socioeconomic level. And we sort of lift up Bob's response as the one that we expect from poor people of, well, just be grateful for whatever you get. Like, why do you think that you deserve, why do you think you deserve to feel entitled to quote unquote more? Versus, really thinking through what it means to find yourself trapped in indentured servitude that really isn't necessarily something you signed on for and is a whole entire economic and social structure that you have to buy into in order to survive in order to survive today in hopes of surviving tomorrow. And I think that there are ways and places that we see that applied in our own contemporary and current context. It's the questions we can ask when, we'll see the news stories. I'm sure they've already been out, but about people going places that offer, present layaway for Christmas and folks going and paying off the toys and clothes that families have put on layaway for their kids so that they can have them. And that's wonderful. That's a great gift. But imagine if we lived in a world where parents weren't having to put toys for their kids and clothes for them and food for them on layaway and having to, wait to be able to share with them things that they need for their development. Just as one example.
Why do we celebrate when people pool their vacation time together for somebody who has cancer, because otherwise they couldn't get paid while they're
right? Yeah, because we don't have paid medical leave for teachers.
Let's celebrate people getting pulled out of the river, but let's also find out who's throwing them in the river. So maybe with the Scrooge being synonymous, and we miss the idea of transformative, maybe it's the idea of Ebenezer. I'm pulling a Charles Anthony Bryant. I'm in fact going to lower my voice a little. Charles Anthony Bryant was a guest of ours, and
just shout out for Charles. He has he put together a full production of music for the season, and that aired live, or not live, that aired on Monday. But I believe there's another one tonight. Look him up; it's incredible.
Yeah, we'll try to promote that because he's awesome, and he walked us through name meanings. And every time we talk about characters, Ebenezer is a Hebrew term for stone of help, and I don't know if it's an intentional name use or if it's just Dickens being like, that's a fun name, because he does that with like, oh, I'm going to name a character Poop Pop and call him Pip. Okay, thanks, Charles. Sorry, it's not that bad, but it's very close. I may be reading Great Expectations right now. Ebenezer, Stone of Help. Is it worse when somebody can help and should help and perhaps knows they can help and doesn't, or when they don't know they can help and doesn't? Is ignorance worse than stupidity? Or which is worse, belligerence or ignorance? That's a better question.
I think anytime that we have knowledge that we choose to dismiss or disregard, that's worse than not having the knowledge in the first place. And so for someone to know that they can help, I think that the part that makes it tricky is I don't think that Scrooge believes that he should help. Mm-hmm. He knows that he could. And I think that sometimes those are different questions. Because one, is evaluative and the other is ideological.
That's good.
I think I'm sitting with Whitney on that one.
Well, Whitney, I want to respect your time, and I really appreciate it, because about 16 hours ago, I texted you and I was like, hey, need a favor. Not you owe me a favor because I owe you like 50, but I need a favor. So add it to my tab. Here at 2 on 1, we end each conversation with a question. Usually Spiff does this because she's so much better at it than I, so I'm going to actually turn it over to the person who always does it.
Oh gosh. And I have so many more questions now too. I hope you will come, and you know what, we may just keep this. I might pose this question after Whitney leaves, if you're okay. Just not the final question, but
also we need to talk about Muppet Treasure Island. So we're just going to add that to the list of interviews.
We do. I also feel like we need to talk about other adaptations of Dickens sometimes, like A Diva Christmas Carol. Starring one Vanessa Williams.
Ooh, I do love a good Vanessa. All right. Well, for all intents and purposes, the final question, Whitney, is what biblical character, story, book, or theme are you most reminded of in Muppets A Christmas Carol?
I think that the biblical theme that is really sticking with me today are several parables of Jesus that I think get thrown into the mix here. The one that I am like kind of clinging to the most in this moment is the idea of the unjust manager, and the one who is given mercy and then doesn't extend that mercy. And I think seeing kind of the opportunities that bubble up in both, fiction, but I also think nonfiction too, for us to choose the ways that we for us to think that we get to choose the ways that we're receiving and also dispensing grace. I think that that's here in this story. I think that's part of the transformation that's told of Scrooge. And I think it's a transformation that's told in contrast to Bob, who is so just and so grace-filled, even to the point of when he is the subject of injustice and the one who is hurt and harmed by this person, he's still willing to say that there's potential for change and transformation and gratitude. So that's my choice. That's my pick.
Love it.
I'm going to go for a parable as well, which is the rich man and Lazarus.
Mm.
Because we're familiar with it, where Lazarus is mistreated and he dies, and the rich man does too, and the rich man's essentially in hell, and Lazarus is in the bosom of Abraham, and the rich man is like, oh, I still have power, you should send him to go warn my brothers. And they're like, yeah, they didn't listen when they were alive. Even someone raised from the dead wouldn't help. But maybe the rich need to talk to the rich. And I wonder if the rich man in the parable, if he was sent back to sing a spooky, silly song, if he could have helped his brothers out. And I like it because it requires personal responsibility. And it also comes after all of the lostness parables in Luke 15.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in one sitting. Like, we're always like, yay, prodigal son. And we miss the whole, like, the rich are damned by their own action or inactions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's my answer. Right.
Well, it's funny that you had said the name thing on Ebenezer. Okay, so I went a little different. I went with Scrooge as Peter. Bear with me on this one. That Peter, just strictly around the name, I was doing a little bit of kind of etymological learning of what Peter, so we always know Peter is the rock or something, but intentionally and early on, that was really kind of meant as like a rough and tumble name. It wasn't the shiny kind of like the rock on the foundation on which we will build the church or anything like that, that it kind of changes over our understanding of Peter changing. And so I went with that thinking, okay, that, the original name could have meant like more clump or stone in that way, and then becomes more of a rock or precious stone. But I like that. So that's where my head went. But then when you named Ebenezer as stone of help, I was like, oh, this ties all back into that as well. In my final, that even in this character and the Peter understanding of rock and stone, that there is Ebenezer carries that language as well. I felt kind of, I was like, oh, I feel okay about this answer that I landed there with more of a kind of, I don't know, in-depth look at the name rather than the overall theme. But I kind of feel like it works, that there is this real understanding of malleability of what one thing can mean and what one thing does, and our own interpretation and understanding in relationship to it. So that's where I'm going to go.
Well, and Jesus called Peter rock because he sunk when he tried to walk on water. Also, don't know why Peter can't swim if he's a fisherman.
Complicated.
There's lots of complicated things in the Bible. We should talk about them.
Whitney Waller Cole is, the Reverend Whitney Waller Cole is the pastor of Creekwood Christian Church in Flower Mound, Texas. You can find her online under @WhitneyNoel on Twitter, and just be her Facebook friend because she's marvelous. Whitney, you've been...
real friend too.
Yeah, yes. You're a real friend, and thank you, because you're
thanks, y'all.
When you
it was so fun
and invite everyone you know, you'll see the biggest gift will be from us, and the card attached will say, thank you for being a guest on 2-on-1 with no notice.
Also on my list, so just let me know when we're talking Golden Girls. Love you guys.
Love you too.
Bye.
Okay. Yeah, can I ask one more question about this?
Yeah.
Do you have time, Arthur?
I have a little bit of time.
Is this story, do we miss the smaller transformations that happen that are actually kind of larger and social? So for me, at the end of this thing, and this has always rubbed me in a weird way for like A Christmas Carol writ large, but the largest transformation for me and my understanding of it is not necessarily always the Scrooge transformation, but what does it mean, especially I'm thinking this going into the new year, for us to kind of change our opinions of those that have, or change our interactions with those that have oppressed us. Like at the end of this movie, there's a large sing-along about being, keeping the spirit of Christmas, this love that happens, alive, right? And Scrooge is there singing with all the people that he has oppressed. And that's a really quick transformation for this entire community who just 15 minutes earlier was like I don't know if celebrating his death is the right word, but like not lamenting that he is gone in a, in a way. And so, but at the end, like all he has to do is one right thing towards community. And it's a really large right thing, right? It's a right siding of himself. But we don't see the kind of social transformation of what that looks like. I don't know. So I wanted your opinion and thought on that.
Well, I mean, reconciliation takes truth telling, and it takes vulnerability, and it takes authenticity. And I mean, we have the story of, well, of course it's got to wrap up that way. And if it weren't, I would have. The theologian in me wants to see like, hey, Scrooge, you got to sit down and talk to each one of these people one-on-one. You got to hear the stories about how they were digging food out of trash cans.
Sorry.
Very nice. You got to hear the stories about how they were digging food out of trash cans and freezing on the streets because you wanted them to pay rent and gave them no lenience. You got to talk to your workers who have gone home frustrated and exhausted every day, but because they're basically slaves to you, they keep coming back and freezing their butts off at work. Like you have to hear all of it. Mm-hmm. I have a weird view on how the reign of God is going to work, and I think there's an act of reconciliation that has to be holy. I think we're going to be able to talk about what happened in full and hear the hard truth without the knee-jerk reactions and defensiveness. I think we lose ego in the reign of God without losing self, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And they needed to wrap up the movie. They had 5 minutes left, and it was much better to be like, look, everybody's happy, ha la la. But I agree. The oppressor needed to be invited, and he wasn't invited. He invited himself. He showed up with here's how I'm going to forgive you, and thus I am forgiven. But they never actually said, you caused harm. It's just like how they interviewed people after the AME shooting. Like, when are you going to forgive Dylan Roof? They don't have to tell you when they're going to forgive. They don't have to forgive.
Right.
They can, but they don't. Like, oppressors don't get to set the schedule.
No. And so for me, that was just more of overarching. It made me wonder what happens on December 26th, right? Like, what's the next day in this Muppet Dickensian London understanding of social welfare and communal equity? Does Scrooge wake up and walk down the aisle and they're all like, hey, Scrooge, how you doing? Good to see you, bud. Does he give them off next Christmas? Does he, paid vacation?
What happens the day that Scrooge has a bad day and he relies on, like, you don't change your behavioral patterns overnight.
Right.
That kind of change isn't real.
No, but it is. But the caveat is that it is possible, right? And that's what this is telling us, is that it is possible. It is worth our time to continue to work for justice.
I wish they would have taken him with a grain of salt, I think. Or maybe they were suspicious. And I think Miss Piggy's suspicion was righteous.
I think that's why it continues to sit with me, is like the moment of that movie that I really hold dear, is because, and maybe it's because I find myself in that space as a pastor, as someone who is looking towards 2021 with great expectations, for lots of different reasons and lots of different things, that there is a newness to come.
January, yeah.
There's a lot to happen in January. And so for me, it was just more like that Miss Piggy saying, like, what's the language that they use at that table? Do you remember it? Like, it's like, for who brought the table. It's like the creator of this there's some like weird creator language that I think was, for people of faith, was interesting. But there was a giver of this meal and of this feast and of this time together. Provider. Thank you. And so, I don't know, for me, it was just very much like her, like, we can't, he is expecting, we have this tiny little chicken and a sick kid and all these things, and he wants you to work on Christmas, and yet here we are to him, and it was, I don't know, especially as we turn into what's next of society, of culture, of community, it very much was, I find a lot of us being in those Miss Piggy moments, or being expected to be in those Miss Piggy moments of,
Grate your teeth and say thank you to your wealthy benefactors.
Yeah, or like, I don't know. I'm thinking of say thank you to Grandpa for giving you this gift. Yet Grandpa has been horrible to you, or what, like go hug Grandma even though you don't want to, or whatever.
Well, that's bodily autonomy,
but it is bodily autonomy. But so it's not the greatest example. You're correct, but
well, I've got a question in response. Then I'm sorry, I cut you off. Excuse me.
No, it was just it was more just that gritted teeth of, regardless of who you are, what time in your life it is, or what your surroundings are, that like, justice and reparation and gratitude are all nuanced and interwoven, and that this is a time. I love Advent so much because it is a time of reflection. It is a time of preparation. And for me, that looks like, what do I need to do to prepare my heart and mind and spirit for what is new in birthing into this world? And that primarily in my life has shown up through not gifts and presents and things like that, but to the Spirit moving in me to change me, so that my commitment and connection to those around me changes, and I don't know, provides space for that newness to blossom. So
I like that. I like that a lot. I had a final kind of thought question, but I think I'm going to pivot on it if that's okay. So Jim Henson, the progenitor of the Muppets, had died before the movie, or during the production of this movie.
I had a question about that. Yes.
And I think it's worth our time, in fact, to hold off on that question, because Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Treasure Island are wildly divergent from previous Muppet movies.
Okay.
And part of it is its adaptation, but part of it is it's not Jim Henson steering it. And I think if we...
Brian, correct?
It's Brian, yeah. And if we watch earlier Muppet movies with Jim Henson at the wheel, we get to see it. But I think we need to see earlier Muppet movies. Just remember A Muppet Christmas Carol. You remember everything you've seen in that. I also want to talk about next week. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put up our promo for Jeff Wunrow, our outstanding sponsor, because I think it's important to note that 2 on 1 is sponsored by Jeff Wunrow Designs. They're celebrating 15 years of making ordinary time extraordinary. You can go to jeffwunrow.com, JEFFWUNROW.com, and place an order and use the code 2 on 1, and it's 15% off all the stoles you buy. That's pretty great.
It's so great. And, Christmas is imminent, right? For those, it's probably a little too late to get your Christmas present from Jeff Wunrow right now, but there are 12 days of Christmas that lead on in. So do that. And for those of us that are probably buying the stoles, or for our family members who are buying the stoles, or communities that are buying the stoles for us or for each other, Easter is so close. Advent is so close. We're already planning. And so don't sleep on this code. This code, you can buy it now, use your Christmas gift money to then cast that vision into the future, help small businesses, buy local, and help us prepare for the next season, the next liturgical season that comes up in just 2 months, or a month and a half.
Easter's April 4th. So like
Ash Wednesday, mid-February. So
yeah, it's an early year. So the reason I wanted us to do our Jeff Wunrow promo now is because I want to make it very explicitly clear to our viewers. We're going to talk about next week. Next week is with Guthrie Graves Fitzsimmons. We're talking about The Mandalorian. Spoilers abound right now because Spiff is not aware of the Star Wars universe. And if you've seen The Mandalorian, okay, you're giving me...
I'm aware of the Star Wars. I feel like it's like Muppets. It's in the vernacular. It's in the lexicon of the culture. I've just never seen... I've seen one Star Wars movie.
The Force Awakens.
Is that the one with Rey?
It's one of the 3 with Rey, yes.
It was the first one with Rey. Okay, that was the first one that I saw. And I was like, ooh, strong women. I'm into it.
I'm giving y'all a chance, our wonderful viewers and listeners. If you haven't watched through The Mandalorian, or like if you've decided like you need to have all pristine knowledge of Star Wars, however that is, this is your chance to sign off and go to jeffwunrow.com, whatever. But spoilers abound. maybe not spoilers. Anyways, okay. So
There will be spoilers next week.
oh, totally. There are, because you're going to watch both seasons of The Mandalorian, and
I am committed. That's what I'm doing for Christmas.
So there are three sets of movies, three sets of three movies each. Okay, episodes 4, 5, and 6 came out between 1977 and 1983. They are it's the Death Star trilogy. It's Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia blowing up Death Stars in almost every movie.
Okay.
Then in the 90s, they made the prequels with Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor, and that was how they led up to the Empire getting built. Okay, and then they just made the recent ones, the 7, 8, 9. So The Mandalorian takes place between 6 and 7.
Okay.
So the Empire has collapsed, but there's still remnants of it. And the events of the movie you've seen haven't happened yet. It's like this 30-year gap.
I will also name that I saw that one movie in the theater and I don't really remember much of it other than I was like, so here's for all of you listening and paying attention, I will not have seen, I'm not committed to watching all of the movies yet. I'm just watching Mandalorian as a standalone thing. And I've been told that I can do that.
Yeah, it's a Western, really. It's a samurai movie, or it's a samurai show.
So I'm going to watch both seasons of The Mandalorian between now and the 30th, which will be our last show of the year.
Yeah. Did you not want me to mansplain Star Wars at you? I'm sorry that I did that. Excuse me.
All good. It'll be our last episode of the season until we start season 2.
Yeah. It's the season finale.
It's the season finale.
Oh my heck. That's so exciting. So our guest is Guthrie Graves Fitzsimmons.
And if you have not read, so I also want to mention, because we like to give our viewers enough time to play catch up a little bit. If you have not ordered or read Guthrie's book, Just Faith, Reclaiming Progressive Christianity, I highly recommend it. And then we have on January 6th, our first episode of
Season 2.
Season 2, we have author Ellie Rocher coming on. I hope I'm saying her last name right. And she has a book coming out that week called 12 Tiny Things, Simple Ways to Live a More Intentional Life. So if you have not read, I believe her book is coming out that week, so I doubt you will have read it. But for our viewers, make sure you order your pre-copies of that. And I believe we're going to talk New Year's resolutions, which, yeah. I think it's
21.
You have 21? I
have 21 New Year's resolutions every year.
Oh, I can't wait to hear more about that and why 21 and all of that. So January 6th, when Ellie comes to join us, we will be talking about New Year's resolutions. I don't do New Year's resolutions. I do resurrection resolutions. So my resolutions start at Easter. But we'll talk all about that January 6th with Ellie.
Oh, I'm a 7. I do New Year's resolutions for Easter, for New Year's, and around my birthday in September. That makes
sense.
Yeah, I resolve the hell out of my life.
Sure, I love that. But we are excited for season 2. Again, we have a new website, so please go and check it out. doonOneproject.com. Like and subscribe to all of our social media pages. It's really helpful that you all do that. So we are on every, I think, platform for podcasts at this point, or at least most of them. You can get our podcast, which is this show, in audio form at all of your streaming locations, but we are on all social media platforms as well. So please, YouTube,
LinkedIn, Pinterest, MySpace.
All of those things are the ones that Arthur oversees. But make sure you like and subscribe and share. And hopefully we will have merch in the new year as well. So, yeah. Well, Arthur, Merry Christmas.
Spiff, merch.
I know.
We're talking about that in our next pre-meeting because I have ideas and plans.
Okay.
Merry Christmas, my friend. One of the things I'm working on are my top 10 posts for January, because I do 10 top 10 posts.
I love it.
I say it every time, but one of the best things to happen in this wreckage of a year is that you and I got to do this, and I really give thanks for you a lot. So
same back at you. I hope at the top of your podcast top 10 list is 2 on 1.
It's definitely the top of my Disciples hosted midweek pop culture theology podcast. So, all right, I'm going to cut us off on Facebook. Y'all, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll see you on December 30th.
See you next week.